Hello, dear children. I hope all of you are in good health and having a great time at home. I welcome you to another online class of English. Today, we will be discussing the second poem from your NCERT textbook of English for class 12, that is Flamingo. The name of the poem is An Elementary Classroom in a Slum, and it is written by Stephen Spender. You can see two names flashing on your screen. Sahib-e-Alam, Lord of the Universe, and Mukesh. Do you know who they are? These are the names of the two boys you met in the second chapter named Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Yes, we met them in the two stories written by Anis Jung. From these two characters, we got to know the deplorable conditions in which the poor people live. Sahib-e-Alam is a young boy who roams around the street of Simapuri collecting rags. He doesn't go to school. He happily scavenges through the garbage in the hope of getting something. He ends up working at a tea stall. Mukesh, he lives in Firozabad, works in a bangle factory. He doesn't go to school either, but he dreams of becoming a car mechanic one day. These boys are living their lives devoid of opportunities. The answer is no. They cannot afford to go to school. They do not have the money to enroll themselves in a school. They have other responsibilities to think about. But here is a hypothetical question for you. What if Mukesh and Sahib-e-Alam could go to school? What would their school look like? Their school. You decide. Now you will see two videos of two different schools, School A and School B. The two schools are quite different from each other. Watch both the videos and then decide your answer to the question that I just asked you. In which school do you think Mukesh and Sahib-e-Alam are most likely to study? This is School A. Or School B. So you saw the videos, School A and School B. School A can be described as a school which had crumbling walls. The building was in a very bad condition. There were no desks to sit on. Children were sitting on the floor. Windows were broken. Roof, it was also in a very dilapidated condition. The surroundings were also not very clean. On the other hand, School B was completely opposite of School A. There were big, huge auditoriums. The environment was clean. Students were all dressed in uniforms. Walls were beautifully painted. Desks, computers, labs, every facility was available. I think we got our answer. Mukesh and Sahib Alam could not afford to be in School B. Only the rich can afford those schools. We are most likely to find them in School A, a basic school offering free education, dependent on the funds received from other sources, neglected by authorities. These schools are built to fulfill the right to education part written in our constitution, but fails to deliver the best because of the loopholes in system. So these two will go to School A while many others go to School B. Then what about right to equality? Two different scenarios catering to two different classes are bound to give two different results, two contrasting results. Come, let us visit one such classroom through the words of Stephen Spender. A classroom where our Mukesh and Sahib Alam can be found. An elementary school classroom in a slum. Elementary school is a primary school for children of age 5 to 10 years. The basic education is offered in these schools. So let us enter a classroom in an elementary school located in a slum. A general analysis of the poem would tell us that it is Spender's political voice that we hear in this poem. Written in 1964, the poem is an example of Spender's political voice. He expresses his ideological position on government, economics, and education. The students in his classroom are underprivileged and malnourished. The capitalistic government is supposed to supply equal opportunity for education. But the classroom in the slum offers little hope for change or progress. Spender names no nation or race. It appears to be a response to the global question concerning social injustice, which was an essential issue in the American civil rights movement of the time. Throughout the poem, the poet's tone changes from pensive to aggressive and finally from frustration to an appeal. Now, I want you to read the poem silently once. You can pause the video here, go ahead with your reading, and then come back to this video lesson. I hope you have done the first reading of this poem on your own. Now let's read the poem together. Far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces, like rootless weeds, the hair torn round their pallor. The tall girl with her weighed down head, the paper-seeming boy with rat's eyes, the stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lesson from his desk. At back of the dim class, one unnoted, sweet and young. His eyes live in a dream of squirrel's game in tree room other than this. Let's take the first two lines. Stephen Spender highlights the plight of the slum children by using vivid images and apt words to picture a classroom in a slum. The meaning of a few words are given on the slide. So gusty means turbulent, and here it stands for full of energy and exuberance. Weeds, a term that you have come across a lot by now. Weeds are the unwanted plants that grow in our gardens that we just pluck and throw away. They have no importance and no value for anyone. Pallor, which means pale appearance. Pale means light colored. Now when someone looks pale, it means that they are unwell, as they lack the natural healthy color one should have on their face. The opening line of the poem contrasts the slum children's faces with the faces of the elite and powerful class described as gusty. So the poet here says that the faces of these children are nowhere close to having some vitality or vivacity, that is, their faces lack energy and exuberance. In the next line, the poet compares them to rootless weed. Here we can see the use of simile, like rootless weeds. It has a double effect. Rootless indicates not belonging or not having a strong foundation, and the word weed means unwanted, as mentioned earlier. The slum children are like rootless weed, unwanted by the society, as well as not belonging to the society. Their hair is unkempt, untidy and messy, spread across their pale face. They are poor slum children who do not get enough to eat. They don't get nutritious food and hence they have poor health. And they also suffer from various diseases due to nutrient deficiency. From these lines, the poet gives us a description of the children seated inside the classroom. He describes 4 children. The first one is the tall girl with her head weighed down. Here. First one is a tall girl. The second is the paper-seeming boy. The third one, the stunted, unlucky heir. And the fourth is the sweet and young, the unnoted boy at the back of the dim class. How has the poet described them is really very important. So this tall girl has her head down. The term weighed down suggests that she is burdened with life. She is not enjoying it. Neither the deprived life she has and nor the class she is sitting in. So she could have her head weighed down literally because of sadness, disinterestedness, lack of energy, or a mix of all these. Another noticeable thing about her is the fact that she is tall. Could she be overaged? Yes, she might be elder than all the other kids sitting in the class and perhaps ashamed to be amidst them, which can also be a reason for her weighed down head, right? Okay, who is the next one? The paper-seeming boy with rat's eyes. The boy is compared to a paper. A paper is thin and a paper is white. So the boy is also emaciated and pale, thin like a paper as well as weak. He has rat's eyes. His eyes are being compared to that of a rat. What are the similarities? A rat has bulging eyes, and this boy, who is thin like paper, his eyes also seem too big for his body. But more significantly, a rat is always looking for food. His eyes search for food, and this boy also has hunger in his eyes. Now let's see the third one. The third one is a stunted boy. Do you know what stunting is? Stunting is the impaired growth and development that children experience due to reasons like poor nutrition, repeated infections, etc. This child has also inherited something from his father. He has not inherited wealth, but a disease. So he has a hereditary disease of bones, which are called twisted. See? The stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones. So this stunted boy is reciting 2 things from his desk. Well, literally he is reciting the lesson, but he is also presenting the disease to the world. Now we come to the 4th child, described as unnoted, sweet, and young. You can see a shift here. These are positive adjectives. This child is younger than the rest and is lost in his own world, where he thinks of outdoor games. He is mentally absent from the class. How is this kid different? While the others are burdened with their life, this one is full of hope. Maybe because he's too young to understand the worldly problems. It also indicates that there is still some scope, as there are young children in the slum who can make a better life for themselves if given the right circumstances and opportunities. Did you notice something? Something really beautiful are there in the last few lines when the fourth child is described. The lines start with a dim class but end up in the outside world, tree room and squirrel's game. What a stark contrast, right? Great transition and somewhat of an antithesis. Dim class, and then we have squirrel's game, tree room, completely different ideas. One stanza at a time. Let's take a look at the poetic devices used in the first stanza. The first one right here. Far, far from gusty waves. It is the use of repetition. When do we use repetition? We use it to emphasize something. Here it has been used to highlight the lack of life and vitality on the faces of the slum children. The second one, gusty waves. As explained earlier, gusty waves mean energy and vitality. So they can also mean the privileged children who are full of life. The slum children are very different and away from the privileged ones. So it is an indirect comparison between gusty waves and privileged children, and so it is an example of a metaphor. Now the third one, a very easy one, like rootless weed. Here, children were compared to rootless weed, a direct comparison with the use of the word like, and therefore it is a simile. Another example of simile is paper seeming boy. The paper seeming boy. The boy seemed to be like a paper. Direct comparison. Again a metaphor. Rat's eyes. The poet doesn't say that the eyes of the boy is like rat's eyes. He just says that he has rat's eyes. What is implied is that the eyes of the boy can be compared to that of a rat's eyes. So, a metaphor. There are a few instances of the use of imagery. Imagery, as you know, is use of language that produces pictures in the mind of the people reading or listening. Can you guess the phrases? I'm sure you can. The way the children have been described evokes their image in our mind, isn't it? Tall girl with her weighed down head, and the phrase paper seeming boy. These phrases produce a picture in our mind of these children. And the last one, a pun. A pun is a form of wordplay that exploits multiple meanings of a term, of a single term. The stunted boy, remember, he is reciting, or we can say presenting his lesson as well as his disease. So the word recite is used for both the lesson as well as the hereditary disease he has. On sour cream walls donations, Shakespeare's head, cloudless at dawn, civilized dome riding all cities, belled flowery Tyrolese valley, open-handed map awarding the world its world. And yet, for these children, these windows, not this map, their world, where all their futures painted with a fog, a narrow street sealed in with a lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of words. In the second stanza, the poet describes the classroom to the reader. The classroom has walls which are in a very poor state. Their color is described as sour cream, sort of dirty yellow. These sour cream walls literally indicates the neglected walls which have turned a dirty yellow, and figuratively a dismal place where all dreams turn sour. The walls are in a derelict condition. They want to be repainted. They need to be repainted. But while the walls represent their gloomy world, the slum, the walls have pictures which has no connection whatsoever with their world. The photos hanging on the walls represent a completely different world, the other world, that is of the rich and the affluent. So what are these things? Which are there as a result of donations given by the rich people. There is a photo of Shakespeare. Shakespeare, who is hailed as the most literary person by people. He has written plays, extraordinary ones. His photo hangs amidst lack of education and lack of opportunities to learn. So, there is a contrast. Then we have the photo of beautiful places that these children have only seen in photos, like these ones. These images are of Tyrol, a historical region in the Alps in northern Italy and western Austria. These developed cities also draw up a contrast between the world of the slum children and the civilized world of the wealthy and the prosperous. The dome is that of an ancient city building standing for civilization and progress. The cloudless dawn and beautiful Tyrolese valley indicate the beauty of nature and hope, which contradicts the condition that the slum children live in. There is this huge gulf between the rich and the poor, which is highlighted through these symbols. And then there is a map, an open-handed map. The map is described as being open-handed in the sense that it is generous with what it has to offer. The map itself is offering the world its world. There are two worlds, because it is laid open and displaying the wealth of its painted world. It offers all the riches and comforts to the people who draw boundaries in this map, who have a say in this world, who have power in this world. The world belongs to them and not the slum dwellers. However, although the map itself may be generous, the circumstances of these children make it difficult for them to take it up on its offer. They are arguably part of the world, or should be, but in fact they could never contemplate a world as vast and without boundaries as that displayed by this map. This map is a world full of opportunities and offers, and it is being offered to the people who already have power and every comfort in the world. On the contrary, the world for these children is not this map. Not this map, but limited to the windows, these windows of the classroom, and what can be seen through them, like the street outside. They are sealed in, unable to imagine a life lived freely outside of the confines of the city, the slum in which they live. The reality of their world is foggy, that is obscure, ignorant and vague. they don't have a promising future. The world they live in is closed in from all sides. They cannot ever break the boundaries. Their streets are sealed with a lead sky. That is, their life's journey always ends on a dead end. Theirs is a life away from rivers, capes, and stars of worlds. While rivers and capes signify the beautiful and free nature full of scope, stars of words signify the great world of literature and knowledge which is out of reach for these slum-dwelling children. It is a depressing chain. Their world, a limited one, a shackled one, limited to the windows of the classroom, that is a slum, and what it has to offer, and not what the world promises to the affluent. Do you see this picture? We don't know where this path leads to. The life of the slum children is also like this. They cannot see a promising future. It's bleak, it's gloomy like this. All these are the words that you see on screen, which have been used to depict the future of the slum children. Foggy, bleak, dull. Sounds cold, miserable, charmless, and completely inhospitable, isn't it? These are symbols that indicate that they don't have a bright future ahead of them. A quick look at the poetic devices now. On sour cream walls donations. This is irony, a state of affairs or an event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects and therefore is often amusing. So we find here these spectacular images, pictures of Shakespeare, Tyrolese Valley, pinned on a wall that badly needs to be repainted. What a contrast, right? Then we have two metaphors. Their futures painted with a fog. Their future is painted with fog. Here fog stands for obscurity or lack of opportunities in the future. Also, the lead sky, a narrow street sealed in with a lead sky, where lead, the metal, indicates that it is a dead end for them, a barricade that they cannot cross. They can never come out of their poverty and the drab life they are living. And then we have this, far, far, again, an example of repetition. We have completed half the poem, the first two stanzas. I hope you can empathize with these children who are like you but still far, far away from you. We will take up the last two stanzas in another video lesson, but before that, I want you to think of the ways in which these children can be helped. Share your thoughts with me. I'm eagerly waiting to hear from you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you soon.